Hi everyone and welcome to a 3D printing video. I'm Agustin from Ballistic and today I want to show you something new. My first video game prop. This is Burst Quill, one of the weapons from the video game Monster Hunter Generations. I designed it for a contest hosted by my mini factory, and it was a great opportunity to do something slightly different from what I usually do. I didn't want to create a prop that was just a visual thing, so I decided to redesign and adapt one of the weapons to be easily 3D printed and functional. If you have seen any of my previous designs, link in the description if you haven't, you have probably noticed I try to create accessible models, which usually means no support material, easy and fast assembly, functional, and printable with almost any 3D printer available. Well, the original weapon is approximately 2 meters long, and that's a challenge. However, instead of creating a smaller, non-functional but accurate replica, I decided to make a different version, like a little badass sister. After telling you all this, now I would like to show you all the creative process, how I designed it, printed it and assembled it. Hope you enjoy with this adventure. Once I chose the design from Monster Hunter Generations I wanted to design, I did some quick sketches. I chose Quill Burst and this is the first sketch I did. It wasn't really easy to do it just because there wasn't any official artwork that showed all the details of the design. So I had to look on the cinematics and take some screenshots just to have some references. But there were some problems because the official artwork here, the weapon you can see here is completely different from the design available on the video game and on the cinematics. So I just took some references from here for the color or the width of the barrel, but it wasn't clear, so I need to almost do it from scratch to look here the size of the bow. It wasn't easy, but in the end I got this design which was pretty clear, or at least enough detail to work on it. There was some problem, and the original weapon is 2 meters long, so there's no way I could design this. So I decided to make my own version. I decided to adapt it to make it possible to 3D design it easily and 3D print it. And I ended up with this. It looks pretty similar, same colors, same shape, but I adapted it to the real world because there's no way anyone can use this. So I made this. Now we can see this small guy is the same size, but now it's only 75 centimeters long, this prop. I did this grid with 10 centimeter squares, and you can easily see, for example, the stock is almost 20 centimeters long, which is the maximum I always design to print in one part. I had to create also a top view to have some references of the width, because sketches, especially if they are bidimensional, can be very misleading in terms of shape and size. The barrel is round, so that was a pretty clear reference for the top view, but it wasn't perfect. I did the last thing and the most important one, and it was making some decisions of how I was going to 3D design it. So I divided the body here in different parts that would form all the 3D printed parts. Before moving to Fusion 360, I decided I was going to divide the prop in these different parts, as I needed them to be smaller than 20 centimeters. The stock was going to be the biggest one, and for example, the end of the barrel, I thought about making a modular design because it may be too short, 75 centimeters, and this part that would be 10-12 centimeters, it could go up to 20 centimeters. Also, the way this was going to be printed is really important. I think it will all going to be printed on the same axis, but for example, the scales are really tricky. It's an organic design like the feathers or scales against geometric shapes. That will be a challenge. So now let's move to Fusion 360 and let's work with this sketch, okay? I've already made this design and it's not a tutorial, but I want to show you how I designed it, because making it functional was a real challenge and I think it completely changes the way you work on a prop depending on what you're designing. So first I created the barrel as I try to work with big parts. Here I added some T-shaped connectors for the scales as it's going to be a separate part, and I want to easily connect them without any glue or anything that could damage. I sliced the barrel using as reference the sketches. I did this 3 cm long as fitly, and we are going to assemble them using a threaded part inside these small parts. Here you can see I gave it some more volume as we are going to thread it, and this is going to act as the nut. So we'll go to wireframe view and we'll see it's still the same. But now I've already added the thread using the option Create Thread and applying it to a cylindrical shape. Now we are going to move back to shaded view, and I want to show you how we keep designing this. I kept giving some shape, and for example on the threads I gave a 0.2mm tolerance because it all depends on your printer and I wasn't sure. Now we are going to work with the top view and we are going to create the parts that form the bow. This can be really tricky. It was really easy to use in the end because this part is really similar, and after you create it you can just edit it or apply Boolean operations just as if it was a normal part. Now we created the scales. This was created using the create form option, and it was really easy. As you can see, all the different scales are individual parts. I first created the biggest one and then moved it and resized it to keep the proportions. Now we move to the main part as I wanted to have some size references, and I added some details. As you can see, this is a solid part, so I needed to create a shell as we are going to make it functional and there will be some parts inside here. Here I started working on the trigger, that will be the most complicated part as it needs to have some tolerances and as it's going to be a moving part. I just kept working on the functional parts and then I just created the trigger. As you can see, this has a small hook that will be the most important part of the design, and now I created the stock as it's the last big part remaining, and I want to have a whole image of how it was going to look. There are lots of parts missing, just as the scope or color, which is important along with the feathers, but it gave me a quick view of the real size that it was going to have and the ergonomics, which is really important for a prop that is going to be used by normal size humans. I gave it some details as this part and now I added the feathers. I did exactly the same. I designed the big feather and I copied and changed the size a little bit, and then I did the same. I just copied and moved it until it had the shape I wanted. So now I made all this a whole part because it's going to be printed in just one piece. I could have made a dual extrusion part, but if this prop is going to be painted, it didn't make a lot of sense. Now what I'm doing is optimizing the design to print it without support material. For example, here we have the threaded parts we talked about, and what I'm doing right now is add some chamfers to avoid using support material. Now we start giving some color to the parts. This is from the rendering part, which is the last one, but we are seeing it because we are moving forward. I created the scope. I just did some revolutions and split the parts, as you can see, because this can be easily printed with no support material, it's just a cylinder. I created the connector, which is going to snap here in this hole. I don't know if I will be able to remove it once I install it, but I'm not really interested in that. I just want to print it easily with no support material. I keep adding some details here, just as this part, and I mirrored and joined all this. This is going to be the main body now. And that's it. As you can see, I worked with the sketch I previously did because it's far easier if you have some references. The only thing I did was I made this last part 5 centimeters longer. Now I'm going to export all these different parts and I'm going to 3D print them. So now that we printed all the parts, these are all the parts for the Quill Burst. So they haven't been post-processed or I haven't removed any support material, mainly because I didn't use any support material. So let's start assembling this. This threaded part is really easy to assemble. You just need to screw it. Then we take the second part and we do exactly the same. If you see here, this flat part matches this one. So the next part is the bow part, the central part, and we need to attach it. It can be tricky sometimes, it all depends on the layer height you use, because the threaded parts have a better result if you use like 0.1 millimeter layer height. It will take a lot of time to print, but the result is really good. Here I used 0.1 or 0.15 millimeter layer height, depending on the parts. Mainly if they had a threaded part, it was 0.1 because I wanted some neat results. So now we continue designing this. Here you need to, if you see, there's a chamfer here, but here it isn't, just because now the main part starts and we don't want any gap here. So as with the other parts, we just need to screw it. And here we have the main parts. We can attach the parts of the bow here with these connectors, like this. That's it. And it holds, but I would recommend using some glue here because there's some gap sometimes. And if you are going to use it as a functional design, I will recommend you to use some glue. Not very much, not a very hard glue, just to hold parts, because this can fall. It's pretty loose sometimes. It depends all in your printers, but let's continue with these parts. And now what we are going to do, we are not going to directly attach the main parts now. What we are going to do is start connecting the main body and the stock part. For this I created, it has 4 different holes here, and I printed 4 different connectors. They just fit loosely because I wanted everything to hold in place, even if you use some glue just to have some references. And now you just need to take these 2 parts, put them together, and that's it. Again, there can be a small gap, if it all depends on your printer, but mainly what you need to use is 1-2 drops of glue here in the middle. Hold it like this for 15 seconds and that should be enough, or at least in the test I ran it was enough. So now we need to insert the trigger. The trigger part can be, it's really tricky, just because this part I pre-assembled it, I inserted it, it's really easy, you can detach it easily, but what you need to do is insert it here, and you need to see this part show up here. Here it has some parts that avoid the trigger from going inside the main part, so you need to press, and it holds in place. You can still remove it, but it's held firmly. So now that we've got these parts, these are really important. As you can see, this pops out. Oh, okay, be sure that when you insert this part shows up here. If not, you will need to disassemble it just as I did. Now it uses the same principle of this. The scope is this part. It has this part here, it's already assembled. You don't need anything else, maybe some glue, or here I would prefer to use some blue tape. It works. And this is the part where it's attached. and it goes here. Be careful with this part because once you insert it, it may be difficult to take it out. As you can see, it's really hard. I didn't want the scope to fall off, so that's it. Now you've got this part, and you just open this and insert it. As you can see, it's kind of loose, but you will do fine with some tape here. The original Quill Burst was held by here from the main character because it was a 2-meter print, and here we are going to hold it like this, like a normal gun, because it's only 75 centimeters long. So now that we've got all these parts, I'm going to remove the scope for the moment. We are going to attach the two main parts. As always, be careful with this part, it needs to go in the middle. And as with any other part, you just need to screw it here, and it's done. Now we've got the scales. I think they were scales, but I'm not really sure. You just need to insert it here. We've got this slide, this T-shaped slide here, and the connector, we just slide it. This will hold in place all the parts because they can still move a little bit. And that's it, the first part, and the second part the same. So now we've got everything almost assembled. We are going to insert these two parts that form the bow. We are going to insert... Okay, you just saw what happens if you don't use any glue. We are going to hold everything in place here, and we are going to insert the scope. As you can see, it can be easily assembled, and we've got this last part that goes here. You might want to use some glue here. So that's it. This is the Quill Burst and the assembly process. It may seem a little bit long, but I just wanted to explain you all the different parts that it has and how it can be created. So that's it, and I hope you enjoyed this part. It's fairly easy, and now if you want to paint this, I would recommend it to paint it just before you assemble it, or at least some parts. The barrel, you can assemble it, glue it, and then paint it, but for example the scope or the trigger, you may want to avoid gluing it before you print them, just in case it breaks or if it doesn't fit properly because of the printer calibration. And that's it. Now we printed the parts, painted them and assembled them, and I want to show you how this works. So here inside the barrel we have a part that moves along with this small stick, and the trigger actions it with a part that goes up to here. So we use a simple rubber band. I would recommend you using something stronger or more elastic to throw things faster, and it works just like this. You press the trigger, it shoots, and then if you want to reload, you just need to push the parts back, and that's it. Depending on the tolerances when you print this and the rubber band you use, it will be more or less powerful. I considered showing you how I painted the model, but it was my first time painting a 3D printed part, and it was a complete mess. I didn't have the materials I needed, and in the end it took me a lot more time than expected. I just would want to let you know that you don't need to use professional equipment or nasty chemicals to get nice results. You mainly need time and patience. Now you have everything you need to make your own Monster Hunter prop. If you have any questions, use the comment section below. I will try to reply to any of your questions. Also, if you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and if you want to support my designs and projects, I invite you to check my Patreon page, which I recently created, and get access to exclusive content and updates. I want to thank all my supporters, especially the Patreon MVPs, which are listed in the description below. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram, and that's it for today. See you next time. Bye.